Okay. There we go. Okay, so let's start a new project. Let's do A4 print. No, not A4, okay, because some of these effects take a while to calculate, so I don't want to make the PCs have a heart attack. So let's just do this HD over here. Okay, screen HD, so 1280 by 720 pixels. You just open one of these, create, there we go. 1280 by 720, okay. What are you using, Photoshop? Okay, so you're typing yourself. All right, so let's go find an image of something. It really doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to find an image of a dolphin. Yeah. Oh yeah, that one's great. And I'm just going to paste it in there. Make it bigger. Let's make this thing this whole size. Okay, cat, squirrel, killer whale, dolphin. Nazan, what have you got? Nothing? What's that over there? A turtle. Very biased towards sea creatures this morning. Okay, so I want to quickly go through this filter menu over here, okay? And it's as simple as basically, and you can go through some of these in your own time because a lot of them are similar and some of them you probably never use ever. But I wanted to just show you where they live and what they do, okay? So just to briefly recap what we've done in the past, a lot of the tools and features that I've mentioned you can access them directly by choosing something from the menu here. Okay, some of the things I've talked about, I've mentioned keyboard shortcuts and things like that. But you can always find the direct pathway to a particular function by finding it somewhere here on these menus here. Okay, and if it's to do with layers, it's mostly going to live under layers. And if it's to do with selections, it's going to live under selections, etc. Okay, and we've done pretty much all of these. Window is basically controlling your interface over here. You'll see most of when you open Photopea the first time, it has this kind of default layout, and these are mostly the ones that you'll use anyway. You've got your toolbar over here and your layers over there, and you've got a couple of extra palettes over here. And you'll see that if you ever accidentally close one of these or they disappear, you can go and turn them back on by going into Window. Okay. And then that's some stuff about changing the language, so you don't really use that there. But there's one that we haven't covered, which is filters. Okay. And so let's go into that today. I want you to have a look. Let's try some of I'm not going to go into filter gallery yet. These are kind of more artistic effects. Some of them are quite cheesy, but I want you to just have a look through some of these. I'll go through some of these menu items today under this filter menu here. So let's ignore 3D right now, but I want you to go to blur because that's a very common one. If you want to blur an image for any reason, there's a couple of ways you can blur it. Okay, if you want to make something just like a flat general blur, you can go straight to blur and then go from the blur menu, and then from the sub menu that pops up, just click on blur. Okay, did it do anything? Yeah, if it did, it was very subtle. Okay, if you wanted to blur more, go to blur and then go to blur more. Jeez, is it doing anything? It's so subtle. Blur more. Okay, it's making a very, 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 very slight change. Okay, and I think the easiest way to show this, oopsie, let me go forward one step there, is I'm going to quickly put in a little white square here. Okay, something with a nice crisp edge, and I'm just going to quickly dump in the color white quickly. And now if I just zoom into this area and I go back to filter, blur, there we go. You can see that it's smudged those pixels just a little bit. And if I go to filter, blur, blur more, you'll see it got a little bit blurrier. And you can just keep doing that over and over again until you achieve the level of blur that you want. Okay, especially for items in the background. If it's not that important, or you're trying to use maybe an abstract background or something like that, then you might want to just take some of the detail out of it by blurring it. Okay, and if you're tired of going blur more, blur more, blur more, blur more, blah blah blah, until you get to the level of blur that you want, you can go to blur and then choose this one called Gaussian blur, or Gaussian. I'm not quite sure how to say that. Okay. And then from there you can set the radius of the blur, which is basically how blurry do you want it. Okay, and if you have the little preview box ticked, it'll show you in the background what your image will look like based on the current setting. So if I drag the slider towards, say, 110 pixels, yes, let me zoom out a little bit here. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur, okay. I mean, up at 162, the image becomes so heavily blurred, I mean, you can't even tell what it is anymore. Okay, and you can drag the slider all the way down to almost nothing, up to like unrecognizable, where it's almost a solid flat color. Okay, and so this is an easy way to do a really, really heavy blur effect on something, and then just click OK when you're done. Okay, so that's pretty simple. That's blur. And if you want to add motion blur to something, you can do that as well. Okay, motion blur blurs something in a particular direction, so it can emphasize, you know, if you have a car or something, it can make it seem like, yeah, it's exaggerating the motion of the car. So let's just go to motion blur, and you can choose the angle at which it occurs, and I would suggest dragging the slider up a little bit to see what effect it has, because at the low settings, under less than 10 pixels, you almost can't see the difference. Okay, so drag it up to something like 42 pixels, and then play around with the angle, and you can see how that blur is changing. Okay. So obviously you need to think about the direction that the object or the picture that you're wanting to apply the motion blur to. You should think about what direction the motion would be going in. Okay. So if you had a car traveling from left to right, you would choose an angle that is kind of horizontal, because that's the way motion blur would occur. We don't really see motion blur with our eyes. It's more of an artifact of cameras. When you take a photograph and the lens is open for a particular amount of time, if the object is in motion, it's going to have a little bit of blur to it. Okay, but we have become accustomed to that, to seeing motion blur and interpreting that as motion, or that something is happening. Okay, but it's just captured within a still frame. So so play around with motion blur as well. You can also get something called radial blur, which does that effect. It's almost like if you took a picture, maybe at like a nighttime when the exposure is quite low, it's not a lot of light, and you were to rotate the camera very quickly while you took the picture, you might end up with something like motion blur. I mean, like this radial blur here, and it's quite a cool effect actually. So there may be one or two cases where you might like this effect. Okay, but this is really kind of not so much within the realms of composition and laying out different elements together, as it is about sort of creating interesting effects for photos and other kind of things like that. Okay, so I'm not sure how much you'd use these effects, but there you go. Okay, there's some blur effects. Let's have a look at the distort ones as well. So if you go one step down on the blur, you'll see distort there, and you can do something like ripple, and then you can choose to, it basically adds a kind of a ripple texture onto it, so you can make it look like the surface of water or something like that. So if you perhaps have a render or a let's say you've colorized a sketch that you've scanned in, and you've got a pool area or a pond or a water feature, and you've got a flat blue color. If you'd like to make it look a little bit more like the surface has been disrupted by wind or ripples, okay, then you can use this ripple filter, and you can adjust the strength over there by setting the amount. And then you can change the size of the ripple. So this is the strength of the ripple, but you can change the size of the ripple by going to, say, small, medium, or large over here as well. Okay, that's very small, large. Set this up somewhere like that. And so you can see in the background, even before I've clicked OK, what that effect is going to look like. Okay, so there's a ripple effect. Let's go back down to distort. Let's try twirl. Okay, so you can twist an image like this. Okay, if you want to create like a vortex or a whirlpool effect. Again, this is very subjective. I'm not sure what kind of cases you would use this in, but there you go. Let's try a different one. Let's try wave. Okay. Wave is even worse. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of settings that you can play with wave. Number of generators. This is almost like the number of sources that the wave is coming from. max amplitude, minimum amplitude. It's fair to say that I've probably never used this filter in my life, but you can do amazing kaleidoscopic type effects like that. So if you're going for something totally abstract, then by all means go ahead and play with these filters to your heart's content and see what comes out. Okay. But especially under the distort menu, this is going to have limited functionality for you guys, I think. Let's try noise. So noise is a great way to, if you ever think of old school film or film grain, okay, sometimes pictures can seem a little bit grainy. And this is a good way to hide artifacts or poor quality images, to add a little bit of noise into the image, especially if you're having problems where you're trying to print a very subtle gradient as well. And if I just create a new layer here, I'm going to put in a very subtle gradient quickly. Oops, that's my paint bucket tool. Gradient tool. Yeah, that's so subtle. Okay, I'm going between two very, very gentle shades of gray there. Okay, looks fine on my screen, but if you print this, you're going to have something called banding. Okay, which is quite possible. Let me printing banding. There we go. Okay, and it's the way the printer tries to approximate a gradient. Okay, remember you have your screen is able to display millions of colors. Okay, but an ink-based printer only has 4 inks usually. Okay, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And so when you specify something to be grayscale, well, usually printers will actually create grayscale by using a little bit of all of the colors, not just the black ink, okay? But where you have very subtle transitions, like from a slightly darker gray to a slightly lighter gray, if I were to print this A4, you might end up with this kind of effect over here, which is print banding, where you can see the different steps in the gradient coming out like that. And one way to hide that effect is by adding a little bit of noise into the image. And if you see, you can't even see it on the projector, maybe very slightly, but as I zoom in here, you can maybe see some faint horizontal lines, okay? And even on my screen, I can start to see banding appearing because the colors are just so close to one another. There's, even the screen is struggling to display them. But what you can do is you can go to Filter, Noise, and then go to Add Noise. Okay, and this is quite a lot, it's on 20% right now. But if I take it down to something teeny weeny, like 3%, okay, and then I go okay, and I zoom in here, you can see I've got different colored noise in there. Okay, it's very subtle, but it almost looks like that snow you used to get on your TV before you tuned it into a particular channel, okay? And by adding a little bit of noise like this in, when you go to print, you can eliminate some of these banding issues, okay? It does mean that the picture looks a little bit gritty up close, but if you're working with decent enough resolution for print, you probably won't notice it, okay? But it will smooth out this kind of a banding effect. And the other reason you might want to use noise is that if you take an image and you blow it up, in other words, you try to make more pixels out of it than there were in the beginning. Okay, so I'm just going to take a picture of a cat here quickly. This one. Yes, that's a big image. Yep. Okay, sorry. So for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to make this cat really small. Hey, come on, cat. Okay, and then I'm going to make it big again. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Okay, so I wasn't dealing with a lot of pixels, and now I've made the cat bigger. Okay, and you can see how pixelated it's become. This was probably a little bit too far. I shouldn't have taken it that far, but you can start to see it's trying to fill in information where it imagines there would have been pixels. Okay, but I'm trying to add more by adding more pixels into it, by making it bigger. I mean, how do I explain this? I'm losing quality basically. I ended up with something that was like, let's say 20 pixels, and now I wanted 100 pixels. It doesn't know, it can't magically understand that that's a cat, and it must put in the pixels where they're, where is it going to get that information from? So it's going to just try its best to blow up each pixel individually, but you're going to end up with this kind of blockiness. Okay, this is perhaps not the best example because I took it a bit far here, but you can take noise, you can add in a little bit of noise here, and you can see that it covers up that blockiness. Okay, it does cover it up with noise. So there's a bit of a trade-off here. So if I go to monochromatic, I can make the noise just black and white instead of color. Okay, if you want to do it like that. and I can adjust the amount. But you can see here it looks very, very pixelated. Have a look around its eyes there. You can almost see like that was 2 pixels and that was 3 pixels over there because it's got this blocky effect. But if I start to just fade in my noise here, let's say maybe to 18%, I can kind of cover up some of that pixelation by adding in noise. Okay, this is not ideal. You don't really want to be in the situation to begin with, but if you do find yourself having to work with a less than ideal picture, adding some noise in can help cover up that pixelation effect. Okay, and if you add it into other parts of your image as well, sorry, not add it into other parts of your image, but if you are compositing parts of 2 pictures together and the one picture has a little bit of grain in the background and the picture that you're importing doesn't, you can add noise into the one you do so that they match. Okay, so if I copy this image again and paste it back in, and let me quickly just select around here. Okay, but immediately have a look at the at this have a look at this area around its ear versus the background. You can see where I've added noise and where I haven't. Okay, so if, for example, you were compositing 2 pictures together like this, the background one had a little bit of noise. Let me tone that down again with a little bit of blurring. Is it that image? No, it's this one. Blur. Okay, this is going to stand out to me. Okay, this transition here. So, of course, you could go in with your eraser. You can make it nice and soft, and you could try. Okay. You could try and blend them together like that, but you're still going to see a little bit of difference. So in order, if you do find a picture that's quite grainy and you want to match 2 pictures together like this, then you can go over here and you can add in a little bit of noise. I'm on the wrong image again. This one. Until they start to match. Okay, like that. And that's a better result. I don't even have to erase that edge, but already they look more compatible. All right, so that's a little bit about noise. Let me go back to Mr. Dolphin here. Filter noise, despeckled dust and scratches. Okay, pixelate. So this is another one. If you ever watched like Survival, like some nudity or something on like one of these sitcoms. Okay, you might be familiar with Mosaic. Oh, I'm on the background layer. That's why it's not coming up. Let me select layer 1. Okay, but Mosaic is basically makes things look pixelated on purpose, but you can also use it for sort of censoring parts of an image if you want. That's probably, look, there you go. Okay, and you can apply any of these effects inside a selection as well. So if I wanted to just be like, oh my gosh, this is totally naked, this thing, let me just blur out those parts. I can create a selection around part of the image that I want to pixelate. I can go to the pixelate menu item under this filter thing here, and I'll just go along to Mosaic. And you'll see there that inside that selection, by increasing the cell size, I can increase how pixelated this looks. And so I can kind of obscure that there, and I can be like, oh, there you go. Now we don't have to look at the giant wang on this dolphin here or something like that. Okay, or if its eye is looking particularly naughty, I can go in over there, and I can go pixelate, Mosaic, and you can do something like that. Okay, and you can use this in an abstract, creative way as well. If you wanted to do like, let's do abstract background. Yeah, there we go. That's a nice background. Let's use that one. Oh no, not that one. I don't want that one. Don't know. What's a good example? Maybe something like that. I don't know. Let's say that you had this background in there. Okay, I'm not really sure how this is going to turn out, but let's say you had some more, like let's say you had a layout of an image or something over here, like this. In buckets. So image there. This image here, I could go filter, pixelate, Mosaic. There we go. I could maybe do something like that. I don't know. Like if you were dealing with something that was quite modular, quite blocky, you could take an abstract image and you could drag the cell size up really big here, and you could give it a kind of a blocky chessboard-looking feel. Okay, if you wanted to do that effect. I don't know. It's up to you. But that's one use for that filter. And then you can go to fragment. Oh, that took a while. Oh, filter, fragment. Oh, that's very weird. It almost looks like lens shape. Okay, so you can play a few around with some of these in your own time. Just figure out what they do. Crystallize. Okay, this this makes this kind of, it looks like that frosted glass that you used to have in your bathroom in the 80s or something. Okay. And if you drag the cell size really up, you end up with something really abstract like this, like some kind of pointillism painting from the early 1900s or something. Okay. So you can do very interesting things like this. In fact, if you actually wanted to replicate some kind of textured glass in a drawing that you were doing, or if you wanted to colorize a sketch or add texture to it or something like that, and you wanted to come up with an interesting effect, or maybe create some kind of abstract wallpaper, you could use something like crystallize maybe. Okay, let's see what else. Sharpen. You guys already know what sharpen does. It's the same as, or it's the opposite as blur. Okay, there's actually a tool for it there. So if you want to use sharpen and blurring, like a brush, by brushing over parts of the image, you can select it from here from your toolbar. Okay, but if you want to apply it to a selection, like this part of the image, or the whole image itself, you can go up to the filter gallery, and you can go sharpen, and you can go sharpen. And the effect will be very subtle until you apply it lots of times. But again, it's a kind of an optical illusion, okay? It's basically finding edges, finding areas of contrast in order to determine where the edges are, and then it makes the edges slightly lighter next to one another. The best way I can show this is by going render, I might sharpen, unsharp mask, okay? And this is something that people do to add, it kind of adds like a fake amount of contrast. It can make your image look quite punchy, okay? So using it in small amounts can kind of help. But you can see if I go to unsharp mask here and I drag the slider up, let me zoom out on my dolphin a little bit. Sharpen, unsharp mask. You can see that when I put the amount on 0, you might almost mistake it for being a little bit blurry, even though it's probably the way the photographer intended. But if I drag this amount slider up on unsharp mask, you can see that the image starts to become more contrasty, okay? And I can adjust the radius as well, and you can see I can get this kind of effect like this. And there are some magazines that suffer from this, especially architectural magazines. When they photograph interiors, you can see that the photographer went and used an unsharp mask, but he's used way too much of it because objects start to appear like they have a halo around them, especially large flat areas of color. So let me find an architectural photograph, something with like a blank wall, because it's easier to show you what this effect can do if you use it too much. Okay. Perhaps this one. Copy it in there. Okay, let's just go back down there, sharpen, unsharp mask. Okay, so that's with no mask applied. And then as I start to drag the amount up, can you see that there is a light halo coming out around this object over there? Now if I increase the radius, have a look at maybe around the edges of this picture. It seems to be like it's glowing, okay. So when you drag this effect up to its maximum, you can see it creates these kind of unwanted effects around the picture. You can see this picture starting to like glow around the edges like that. And that's because the algorithm is looking for those areas of contrast in order to determine edges. Like, you know, there's a dark border of this picture over here, and then there's the lighter color of the of the wall it's against. And so the software is recognizing that, and so it's adding lightness onto that light part and it's adding darkness onto the dark part. So it's increasing the contrast around those edges to make the image seem artificially sharp. Okay, but if you use too much of it, you start to end up with this weird halo effect. Okay, like somebody smeared Vaseline on the lens of the camera or something. It's very odd. Okay, so try not to use that too heavily, but in small amounts it can just add the right amount of punch and contrast to your image to just help it pop off the page a little bit. Okay, so that's enough of going through these menus. Let's go to filter gallery here. So there's a couple of more artistic effects you can apply here. Okay, so let's go, I'm going to go back to the image of my dolphin there. Filter gallery. Aha, okay, and so you can see some artistic filters here, and these are really cheesy, and most of the time you won't ever use them, but sometimes some of them can be quite useful. Okay, but they have little names over here, and if you click on these little thumbnails on the side, you can see a preview of what it will do to the image. Okay, this one's called colored pencil, and then you have some settings on the far right here which you can change, like stroke width, okay, which is how long you want to make the pencil strokes seem. And it's all just simulated, okay? It's not the same as actually sketching it, but you can get a kind of an approximation of various artistic effects as if you'd drawn it or something with a different you've drawn it with some hand media and it wasn't a digital image that you just downloaded. Okay, paper brightness, you can change things like this. But these effects take quite a long time to apply, so there's a slight delay between when I change the setting and when I see it previewed here on the left-hand side. Okay, so you can go to like paint daubs, and you can see this is like if you try to paint in an image, it makes it a little bit blurry like this, add in sharpness. Okay, rough pastel, underpainting, dark strokes. Okay, so you can change it quite a bit like this. You can do a glass distortion, ocean ripple, and then under sketching, these are quite interesting. Note paper, okay, and you can change the image balance like this. You can choose which part of the image. It's basically got two colors to choose from here, okay, and you can choose how much. Yeah, look at that. Note paper, reticulation. Okay. So again, these are effects which I don't think you'll use very often, but I want you to be aware of them anyway. Stamp is quite useful. If you have a pixelated image, you can apply a stamp to it, especially if it's like a two-color logo or something like that. You can apply a stamp to it, and it kind of smooths the edges out a little bit. Torn edges. Again, some of these don't come out so nicely. Photocopy, graphic pen. Okay. So maybe if you wanted to photograph, or maybe you want to do comp in some sort of artwork onto the wall of another design or render that you have, you want to make it look artistic, but you want to use a particular image, you could quickly run through one of these filters in order to achieve a particular effect. Okay. And then if we go right down to the bottom, you can do some texture like craquelure. All right. Grain, mosaic tiles. Okay. You can change the tile size like this. Stained glass. Very interesting stuff. Okay. So I just encourage you to go and play around with those in your own time. But there you are. Filter gallery, okay. And you can click the X if you decide not to go ahead with it, or you just click OK when you're done setting playing around with the settings and finding one that you like. Alright, so that was filters. And that's pretty much the last part of the program I want to teach you. The rest of the lesson today is just going to be recap, and we're going to do tutorial 4 as well. Okay, and I'll do it with you as well, so you have a little bit of help, something to follow along. So I do want you to get more and more independent at doing these, because when it gets to your brief, you're obviously going to do them all individually. And the other part of this lesson is going to be a recap. So is there anything that anyone wants to cover again? If you're feeling a little shaky about selections or masking or how do layers work, something like that, is there anything that you want to cover again? If you can't think of it now, during the process of doing tutorial 4, you might come across it. Okay, you might have some struggles there, and then I can help you with that in a kind of contextual way. Alright, so if we have no questions? No? Okay, then I'm going to hand out tutorial 4, and you guys can get started on that. Let me do that. Okay, so tutorial 4. My estimate is that it should take you about 1 hour. Okay, and we're going to incorporate some layout elements here. So we've kind of been messing around with single images at this point, but I want you to combine a lot of elements together now. And you're going to be recreating this example down here. Okay, as accurately as you can. This ocean view example of a layout over here. So I've given you some images to use already, okay? F, G, H, L, K, and M, okay? And if you follow this link there, tinyurl.com/bhcdp1, those images will be in there along with some of the other ones. Are they not there? Oh, excuse me, let me put them in there now quickly, all right. Give me 1 second. Okay, so sorry for that. All right, but the images are there now. So just ignore the printed page I gave you. There is no image F, okay? It's just G, H, L, K, and M. There are 5 images. They are basically this image up here of this exterior, this interior image. The sketch down here, that's 3. 4 is this sample of leather, but it's not that color, okay? And then there's the picture of a couch. So there's 5 images there. This blue square is not an image. I'm going to ask you to create that, okay? So I'm going to quickly go through the points here. So create an A4 portrait document for print, 300 DPI, in other words, okay? And replicate the example below. So you're going to go to File, New, whatever, and you're going to make sure that you select Print as your category for the new file. And then you're going to choose A4, it's going to be portraits. And then I want you to download these images. We're not going to copy and paste them directly from our browser into Photopea. I want you to download them. Because if you look at the bottom of this point over here, it says use smart objects where possible. Okay, so you're going to go open and place when you're laying out these images. Okay, but you're going to start with the A4 portrait document. Then you're going to orientate, scale, flip, and position the supplies images as needed. Okay, so I haven't already supplied them at the correct size. So when you open and place them, they may not necessarily be the size that you see in the example. You need to use your transform tool in order to get them to that size and the approximate position as you see here on the page as well. And in some cases, I think maybe this one is actually flipped left to right. All right, so you're going to have to flip that the correct way as well. And I'll show you how to do that, but you should be able to figure it out as well. I think if you right click on it, you can choose to flip horizontal. Okay, so you need to make sure the image is the right size and roughly the right position. You can always tweak the position later. As the example over there, you need to place the text as well. Okay, so you can see it says ocean view over there, and I've got some paragraph text here. It's just filler text. You can use lorem ipsum if you want as well. Placed it in a similar font. I can't remember what font I placed it in, but you can see that it's a serif-based font, okay, because I've got those little decorative elements at the tips of my letters, okay, those little feet there. So choose something similar to that, and you'll see that this one is bold and this one isn't, so you're going to have to use some text formatting there to make it look like that. And take a look at the spacing between the letters here as well. Okay, you're going to have to probably open your character palette and tweak that so that the spacing appears similar to the example. You'll notice that the leather sample I've given you is like a reddish brown color. You need to make it teal, so you need to perform a hue adjustment on that in order to get it to that color. Okay, it's also not round, so you're either going to have to create a selection and cut that round part out, or you're going to have to mask it in order to make it round. Don't merge any of your layers, okay, because I would like you to, well, I'm going to come around and have a look just now when you've had some time to work on it, what your layer structure looks like. But I don't want you to squash any layers together. I want you to keep them separate for now. Use Smart Object where possible, and then export a JPEG of your final document and email it to me. Okay, so for those of you who don't finish today in class, you can email me a JPEG of your document, but it's only 9:40 right now, so I think we'll all finish anyway. All right, so I'm going to give you some time to go ahead and crack on with this, but yeah, the goal is to replicate this example here, okay, the position, and you can notice that the couch is deep etched as well, okay. I said remove the background from the couch image. You need to do that as well, so you can use the selection tools, you can use color selection and select white, you can use the magic wand tool, and make sure your tolerance is set to something good. Okay, I don't know, it's up to you. You might have to use a combination of those things. And also notice that certain layers on top of other ones, okay. This interior scene is sitting on top of the sample of my leather, and the couch is sitting on top of that. So that gives you a clue as to what my layer structure looks like. Okay, so best of luck.